This video is intended to walk you through the steps you need to complete to finish your assessment for the 2022-2023 school year. The first thing to note is that this year we're focusing on program level assessments, which just basically means that for the last 3 years the college has been assessing institutional outcomes 1, 2, and 3. But this year you're going to be focusing on course and program assessments that may and probably will fall outside of those institutional outcomes. In order to find out which courses and outcomes you need to assess, go to the Big Bend homepage, About Us, and then Instruction and Assessment, and it will pull up a page that is the assessment page, and then you'll scroll down until you get to Assessment Plans. You'll need to find your division and open your 7-year plan. The 7-year plan is actually on a larger document, so it's usually the last part of the document. So you'll need to scroll down to find the 7-year assessment plan and look at the 2022-2023 year and find the program outcomes and courses that need to be assessed for this year. So one thing you need to do is consider the level of coordination that needs to happen this year. In the past, the assessment committee has coordinated assessments through prepackaged plans or through having everybody do the same institutional outcome. If your program or division or department had decided on some level of coordinating assessments, make sure your assessment fits with what the group is doing. At the very least, programs should be coordinating common outcomes that are being done by everyone, if possible. So for example, the entire academic transfer program should be assessing program outcome 4 this year, if it is included in one of the courses that's taught within the program. So you see that the English department is assessing program outcome 4 in some of its classes, and so is the psychology department. And so because we're both assessing program outcome 4, we might want to consider doing an assessment that reaches across multiple departments or even divisions, and consider doing assessments that let us look at institutional outcomes that we're trying to understand or institutional changes that need to occur. If your program does not have a common outcome to assess, coordination may not be possible, and that's okay too. So another thing you might be doing this year is continuing an assessment from a previous year. While assessing outcomes that fall outside of the 3 institutional outcomes is one of the objectives for the next 2 years, another objective is to allow faculty time to revisit and continue an assessment from previous years. And in the future, after the next 2 years, we're going to kind of build that into our 7-year plan process. What this will do is it'll allow faculty time to close the loop. Closing the loop is an important part of the assessment process and something that the accrediting body will look for. For example, maybe you did an assessment last year and you ended by saying, I'm going to try this brilliant idea next time. Well, you can try that idea now and close the loop on that assessment. And for example, if maybe political science, Introduction to Political Science, did program outcome 4 in 2021-22, and they want to keep looking at it in 22-23, well, they could assess that outcome again and try to come to some sort of conclusion about what problems they found or what they thought was interesting. So one thing we want to continue to assess this year is assessing for improvement. So there's really 2 types of assessment that occur. One of those is assessing for competency. Basically what assessing for competency looks like is you find an outcome, so something you want students to learn. And for example, students will be able to cite sources. You find a thing in your course that addresses that outcome, so a citations quiz. You show that students are meeting or not meeting that outcome, so maybe students scored an 80% on the citations quiz. So the conclusion you draw is that you're teaching to the outcome or that you're competent. This isn't exactly what we want you to be doing. And the reason we don't want you to be doing that for this assessment is because that's already kind of what you should be doing in your job. Instead, what we want you to be doing and showing the college and really showing the accrediting body when they look at it is that you're trying to assess for improvement. So what assessing for improvement looks like is it's really just starting the assessment cycle a little bit further into really starting assessment a little bit further into the cycle. And so you start with a problem. So Find a problem with an assignment or lesson related to an outcome, preferably with data to support that it is a problem. So 50% of students cannot cite sources correctly. So that might have to do with an outcome about citing sources, but you're starting with that problem that you see. Suggest and implement a solution in your classroom. So you might say something like, I'm going to make a lecture video about citing sources and give credit for watching it. And then you're going to compare the original data related to the problem to the results after implementing the solution. So you might come away with a conclusion. You might say something like, after implementing the lecture video, 80% of students can cite sources, so 80% being better than 50%. So the conclusion you would draw is that the changes I made improved or made worse, whatever happened, the ability for students to meet an outcome. Now, there is a reason why people tend to do assessing for competency instead of assessing for improvement, and that is that if you don't make a change in the quarter, you'll only be able to assess for competency. In order to assess it for improvement, you have to find a problem, make a change, and compare the results while the quarter that you're teaching is going on. So, if you look back on something, all you can do is try to look at whether what you were doing was meeting the goals of the course. So if citations are something you should be doing in your class, you can say, well, I have this assignment for citations. This is the grade the students got on it. And so I am teaching to those outcomes, and the students are not coming away with what I want them to come away with. However, when you assess for improvement, you're looking at that there is a problem, and then you're making a change in your classroom. Well, you can't make a change in your classroom if you start your assessment on the last day of the year, on the last contract day of the year. We understand that sometimes assessment doesn't have the priority that we might like it to. And so what we're going to try this year is an incentive program. So any faculty which assesses for improvement and provides proof of that in their assessment will receive a gift card. And basically, the gift card's probably not going to be a ton, but basically we're trying to just create just enough incentive that makes you think, well, maybe I'll just do this assessment during the quarter that I'm teaching instead of trying to write it up on the last day of the school year. And that, in my opinion, doesn't take a lot of extra work to do that, but it does just take a little bit extra consideration and a little bit extra planning. So we're going to try that out and see how that works. And yeah. So once you've figured out which courses you need to assess and which outcomes you need to assess, you're going to record your plan. And what that means is under the instruction and assessment page, you're going to find the assessment plan template, and then you're going to fill out the plan, the part A of this document, for each course assessment you're doing. You are going to email a copy to the dean and then keep a copy for yourself. You're not actually submitting this plan to SharePoint or to the assessment chair. It's not a complete plan. We're having you email it to the dean for two reasons. One is kind of keeps you on track, just knowing that there's somebody out there that knows what your plan was. And then the other part of it is that it tends to often be the case that at the end of the year, people forget what their assessment plan was and they can't find that on their computer. So if you email it to the dean, then you can go back in your emails and you can find whatever that plan was. The next part is just to simply do your assessment, which means during the quarter and the time that works for the assessment, do the assessment in the class that you're teaching. Again, I'm putting this in there because I want to remind people to assess for improvement, which requires doing the assessment before the last day of the school year. The last thing you're going to do is submit your assessment. So you'll go back to the Word document you emailed to the dean. You'll finish filling out the document by completing the conclusion, and you'll submit that assessment right after you finish doing it. So if you go into the assessment template, you're going to see assessment conclusion, and then you'll finish filling this out, and as your last step, you will submit it to SharePoint, and it gives you the directions in that document to do that. I suggest strongly to submit to SharePoint by copying and pasting the answers from the Word document to the SharePoint. That Word document where you're tracking everything, this document, the assessment template document, you're not actually submitting that to me, you're not actually submitting that to the dean. I just have you fill it out so that SharePoint doesn't erase everything you've done if you take too long. So it's really just a document that's there so you can copy and paste your answers. And I promise every year I get 4 or 5 people that say, hey, I submitted assessment, did you get it? And I tell them, no, like I didn't get it. And it's probably because they were on their computer filling out into SharePoint the answers to the questions that are on this assessment template. And so they took too long and then SharePoint logged them out. So really just do it the way that I'm suggesting so that you don't have to resubmit your assessment. So I do want to just say one last thing, which is after people watch this video, a lot of times I'll have somebody come to me who just says, but I don't understand what the actual assessment is. Like maybe this video just had too many parts or whatever. So I do want to just say this. The actual assessment that you're doing is just basically this part, which is that it's the problem that you focused on, the change you made, and the data showing the results of that change. Everything else is trying to kind of account for things or get you to do things in a certain way. But when you're actually just thinking about what do I need to do for my assessment, you just need to find a problem, make a change, and then show the results of that change. And that's assessing for improvement. That's the highest goal of what we have for you to do right now. So just keep this in mind as you're going along. It's not as complicated as maybe it seems when you're thinking about it abstractly. It's a very simple thing that all of us are doing in our classrooms anyway, but we're just trying to have you record it. So when you fill out that SharePoint document or the Word document before the SharePoint document, we're asking you which courses is for, which quarters is for, what what outcome is it related to. But the most important thing that I'm looking for is that you saw a problem, you made a change, and then you gave me the data showing how that change impacted your classroom. And that's the thing the accrediting body is looking for too, to make sure that our faculty and our institution and our programs are just making changes as we go along to our teaching or the way that we're doing things that are trying to continually improve upon what's going on at the college.